It is. So I am kind of a traditional Harvard psychiatrist. I have been a psychiatrist for 27 years and actually lead the education department at what's now the top ranked psychiatric hospital in the country, and educate mental health professionals on this. So mental health is near and dear to my heart. And I have done research, I do education, I treat patients, and most of the people that I see have treatment-resistant mental illnesses, meaning the pills aren't working for them, the psychotherapy isn't working for them, even the shock therapy isn't working
Wow.
for them. And they come to me hoping to find a better answer.
My own experience with mental health challenges being put on medications at a very young age at 14. It was also the 90s. I'm dating myself a bit, but all the Prozac and the ADHD meds and all that stuff was becoming very popular. And it was seen as kind of a cure-all. So it's like, let's put her on all this stuff because we can't really manage everything. And it never really worked. So frustrating because you still feel like there's this cloud over you constantly, and for me, finding a ketogenic approach and more of a carnivore style diet was the first time in my life that I felt like the cloud was gone.
Your story is not uncommon. A lot
Mm,
of people will say, oh, she just had a treatment resistant mental illness, or she must have been difficult, or maybe she wasn't trying hard enough in therapy,
yeah.
or maybe she's like one of those whiny, lazy people who just wanted attention and she wanted to be sick. Um, and those accusations are all too common. And I just want to put that out there. But let me say for the record that the majority of people who get treatment for mental health problems do not get fully better
Mm,
with our current treatments. Look at the studies that have been done, and we have decades and decades of research on this. More than 50% of people who get treatment for a mental health problem do not fully get better. Mental illnesses are now the leading cause of disability on the planet.
yes.
And depression, plain old depression that we have all these antidepressants for,
Hmm.
is the number one cause of disability on the planet. And it's not because people aren't getting treatment, it's because our treatments fail to work for far too many people. Sarah, you are not alone. You are joined by hundreds of millions of other people who are just as frustrated, with like, I'm doing everything they're asking me to do and I'm not getting better. My claim to fame over the last like 6 years or so has been using the ketogenic diet as a treatment for mental illness, because you're not alone. I have talked to hundreds of other patients, providers, researchers. This is not an unusual thing. This is not a fluke. You're not a rare person who has been able to put your mental illness into full and complete remission, get off your medications, and go on with your life.
Hmm.
And right now, the neuroscience in the mental health field say no one knows what causes mental illness.
Hmm.
All we know are these risk factors, or these different factors that are involved. Things like neurotransmitters, genetics, hormones, stress, trauma. But nobody knows how they all fit together. And everybody assumes, well, these are brain things. These are clearly, the symptoms are coming from your brain. It's a brain disorder. That doesn't have anything to do with your diet. That doesn't have anything to do with your digestive tract. It doesn't have anything to do with junk food. So why the hell would anybody be talking about a diet? These are serious brain disorders that ruin people's lives, that cause
Hmm.
tremendous suffering. But I'm here to tell you, if you actually want to understand how all of those factors fit together, how can we put together and make sense of neurotransmitter imbalances or dysfunction, hormone changes, genetics and epigenetics, inflammation, stress, trauma, drug and alcohol use? How can we put that all together and make sense of it? you actually have to go to this thing that we call metabolism. And I am arguing that mental disorders are metabolic disorders of the brain. And that mental disorders basically represent people's brains doing something that they're not supposed to do. They're kind of malfunctioning. They're doing something they're not supposed to do, or they're failing to work in the right ways when they should be working. Like if you forget something, or you can't remember, or you can't concentrate, your brain should be able to do that. But for some people, it's just not able to. And in order to understand what would cause the brain to malfunction in those ways, I am arguing, based on decades and decades of science, that you have to understand metabolism. And in order to understand metabolism, you have to understand these tiny little things in most of our cells called mitochondria. And once you put all of that together, once you put all of the science together and do a deep dive into it, you can actually make sense of mental illness. And you can understand all of the connections between things like neurotransmitters, hormones, genetics, trauma, stress, sleep, inflammation. It's the only way you can understand how all of those things connect. But much, much, much more importantly, new treatments become obvious. And those new treatments include things like the ketogenic diet or the carnivore diet, or yoga, or stress reduction, or lots of other, or managing substance use. All of those things are going to play a role in treatment.
When we are on a ketogenic diet, our mitochondria actually make 4 times more ATP.
So I don't think that everybody has to be on a ketogenic diet. If you're pregnant, you might not want to be on a ketogenic diet. Because you're trying to grow another human being, and that human being is sucking resources from you, sucking energy, including some carbohydrates from you. And you need to be eating enough to provide all of those nutrients. But what I will say is that for people, especially for people who are having mental or neurological symptoms, whether it's anxiety or depression or addiction, or something more serious like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, those represent your brain malfunctioning. We know that metabolic problems are playing a primary role in that malfunction. And what that means is that the mitochondria, on average, for most illness states, the mitochondria aren't producing enough energy. And it seems to be because they have trouble using glucose as an energy source. And so when you go into a state of ketosis, glucose is still available because we all make glucose in our livers through gluconeogenesis. So your body will, you don't have to eat the glucose. Your body will make some glucose so that it's always, there's always a little bit available for any cells that might want it or need it. You're providing this alternate source of fuel, ketones, and also fatty acids and other things. But for the brain, it's mostly ketones. And the brain can use ketones, and those mitochondria can use ketones even when they have trouble using glucose as an energy source. And what that means is that you can take a brain that is somewhat energy deprived. Or brain regions that are somewhat energy deprived, and so they're not functioning properly, and you can get them running on all cylinders. You can get them fully functioning. And when people's brains are running on all cylinders, they feel good. They feel balanced. They feel healthy. They're able to think clearly. They have motivation and confidence and energy. And their brains aren't doing unusual things that they're not supposed to be doing.
I tried carnivore because I thought, I had a lot of IBS issues, a lot of gut issues, which I know go along with issues with the brain, kind of the brain being a little bit more on fire. And that's why I tried carnivores. My doctor said, you have IBS and not much I can do for you, eat more fiber. And I was like, I'm going to do the opposite. which ended up working out great for me. But it was the end of that 30 days. Not only did I have a nice flat stomach and no more digestive woes, but the mental clarity, the feeling, that the calmness I felt in my brain at the end of that 30 days was like nothing I had ever gotten from any antidepressant, anti-anxiety med.
So I have published case reports in the medical literature. So for any of your viewers who get this kind of response of, oh, that you're just an anecdote, you don't matter, I'm going to say, no. You are an example of an evidence-based treatment. The ketogenic diet is an evidence-based treatment for epilepsy. It stops seizures even when medications fail to. We have decades of neuroscience literature telling us exactly how and why this diet can stop seizures. It turns out that we use epilepsy treatments in psychiatry all the time in tens of millions of people. Things like Depakote, Tegretol, Lamictal, Topamax, gabapentin or Neurontin, Valium, Klonopin, Xanax, all of those are anti-seizure treatments. So the ketogenic diet can stop seizures even when those pills fail to. So we've published lots of case reports. I have published science reviews in high impact neuroscience journals and psychiatry journals, talking about the science of why this should be taken seriously. And we actually have at least 5 controlled trials underway now of the ketogenic diet for serious mental illness, including bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. There are other trials for ketogenic diet for depression, ketogenic diet for PTSD, ketogenic diet for alcoholism. So the alcoholism one actually was done by the national government, the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. The lead studies actually come from a woman named Nora Volkow, who is the director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse. She is a world-renowned neuroscientist and researcher. She and others have been doing research on alcoholism, for decades. And what they've found is that certain brain regions are actually metabolically compromised. They're not getting enough energy from glucose. And when alcoholics drink alcohol, the alcohol actually gets turned into a molecule called acetate, which serves as a fuel source to those exact brain cells, and it helps those people feel better. Wow. So when they drink alcohol, their brain starts firing on all cylinders.
Exactly. That's exactly how it felt.
And when they don't drink alcohol, their brain is not firing on all cylinders. And so they're craving it and they want to feel better. They want to feel normal. And so they keep going to alcohol. So she and all of these researchers knew that, and they've been doing these animal studies. They quickly figured out, well, maybe instead of alcohol as a fuel source, we could find another fuel source that might replace the acetate from alcohol. And they turned to the ketogenic diet, thinking, they were wondering, like, will ketones be an adequate fuel source for these brain cells that are struggling? So they actually recruited a group of patients with alcoholism to the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism kind of research center. They went in basically for a detox. Half of them got the standard American diet, and the other half got the ketogenic diet. And then they all got detox normal protocols, and they got brain scans and blood tests and all sorts of other things. The people who got the ketogenic diet needed fewer benzos for their detox taper. Despite getting less detox medicine, they had fewer withdrawal symptoms. They had fewer cravings for alcohol. And importantly, the brain scans showed that these brain regions that were normally energy deprived were actually functioning better.
Wow.
And their brain inflammation decreased with the ketogenic diet. So anybody who's done keto probably already knows this. If you do drink alcohol, it hits you a lot
Oh yeah.
harder,
Oh yeah.
hits you a lot harder than if you're not in ketosis.
Mm-hmm.
And these researchers found exactly that in the rats. They tested rats. They had half of them on a standard diet and half of them on a keto diet, and then gave them a dose of alcohol. The rats on the ketogenic diet had a 5-fold increase in their alcohol levels.
Oh, wow.
And when they were in ketosis. So what that means is that if you are somebody who is struggling with alcohol use disorder and you want to overcome your alcoholism, the ketogenic diet might be a really powerful tool to give you more of an edge, to give you more of an advantage.
Yeah.
But it comes with this caveat. If you relapse while you're in ketosis, you could get a lot more drunk than you've ever been.
Yep.
So don't think, so you just need to know that, number one, do not be getting behind the wheel of a car. Like, even if you think like, oh, I can have 2 drinks and I'm fine to drive, 2 drinks might turn into 4 drinks or 6 drinks on the keto diet.
When you've had a mental issue, whether it's depression, alcoholism, any of those things, weight becomes secondary. Weight becomes one of those things that's like, great if it works out, awesome. It's like a secondary benefit. But if I could just not feel like a crazy person and emotional and all over the place and not have any control over my emotions, that would be the number one thing I think that people can really get from this type of approach.
I 100% agree. And I have talked to so many people who have said that. And, I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people are like, oh, nobody can do the keto diet and sustain it. It's not a sustainable diet. But for people who have struggled with mental health issues, and there are hundreds of millions of people, there's actually, before the pandemic, there was about 1 billion people on the planet who had a mental health issue. And since the pandemic, numbers have gone up. So
Wow.
you're not alone. And for those people, I've talked to so many people who say exactly what you just said. Like, losing weight was nice, but that was just icing on the cake. Like, the cake was like, oh my God, I have my life back and my brain back, and I feel good and I feel normal. Like, this is a miracle. This is nothing short of a miracle. The easiest place to start is with the epilepsy literature, because again, I'm a psychiatrist and we use epilepsy treatments all the time. So in the epilepsy field, when they use the ketogenic diet for seizures, they usually tell people this probably is not going to need to be a lifelong diet for you. They usually tell people 2 to 5 years. We want you to be on this diet for 2 to 5 years. And then we're actually going to encourage you to try to transition off the diet to see how you do. More than 50% of people are able to transition off the ketogenic diet and maintain the same benefits that they got. And what we think is happening in the brain in particular, but actually throughout the body, is that the ketogenic diet induces 2 kind of scientific processes. One's called mitophagy, and the other is called mitochondrial biogenesis. And so both of them relate to these things called mitochondria. And what the first one, mitophagy, means that it kind of gets rid of old or defective mitochondria and replaces them with new ones. And mitochondrial biogenesis means that your cells actually start producing more mitochondria. So that at the end, so if you do keto or carnivore for 2 years, most of your cells will actually have more mitochondria than they did to begin with. And those mitochondria will be healthier. And we think that is probably the critical element in improving health, so that, you've gone through your kind of metabolic reset or mitochondrial reset or reboot or whatever we want to call it. And so your cells are actually much, much healthier than they were before you started any of the diet. And that means that your cells can handle carbohydrates sometimes. Your cells can handle those things. Now, if you started eating tons of junk food that we know is really bad for mitochondria, so high fructose corn syrup is not good for your mitochondria, causes inflammation, if you started eating a lot of junk food and at the same time you were highly stressed, you probably would start slipping back into depression. I will say that I have met some people, even people with epilepsy, who aren't able to stop the diet.
Yeah.
And almost every time that they try to stop the diet, their symptoms come back, and sometimes come back with a vengeance.
Yeah.
And so I think that there are some people who need the diet long term and maybe even for life.
My daughter, who's 14, she has pretty severe autism. And so we have her, she started exhibiting some signs of seizures, the absent seizures. And so we just put her right on keto and cleared it right up. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So I'm a believer in that. We have a doctor friend who's down in Jacksonville, Florida, who works specifically with kids on the spectrum. And her daughter has horrible seizure disorder. And she did a presentation for us, years ago, about puberty and autism, because that's typically when it shows up with the autistic kids, is puberty. And she put her daughter on keto. And to this day, if her daughter gets a hold of one French fry, she'll go into a seizure. Wow. But as long as she keeps her away from the carbohydrates, no seizures, which is just remarkable and amazing, because when you have a child that is having seizures, it is terrifying.
And very, very tragically, a lot of neurologists
they don't even recommend it.
They don't recommend it. And I think that is criminal. We have 2 Cochrane reviews. So these are like the ultimate gold standard analysis of all of the research that's been done in the medical field. And we have 2 of them saying that the ketogenic diet for treatment-resistant epilepsy is far, far superior, at least in children and adolescents. The adults, the literature is less clear because adults have trouble doing the diet, at least
compliance.
At least under researchers' instruction. But for the children and adolescents, your likelihood of becoming seizure-free as compared to just trying yet another pill, 3 times more likely to get seizure freedom, 6 times more likely to have significant improvement in your seizures compared with trying yet another pill. And so I think it's unconscionable that people with treatment resistant aren't offered the ketogenic, and actually aren't strongly encouraged to try the ketogenic diet.
It's a crime, honestly, because like I said, with my daughter, we were going to undergo all these tests and put her through a bunch of stuff. And I said, let's just do this first. And it was gone. She stopped doing the blank stares and stopped having the little episodes. And why not? Why not do it?
That article that came out was simply a review of all of the research that's been published over the last 30 years. And so it was actually nothing new. It was a review article, just reviewing already published literature. And so any good, decent psychiatrist or neuroscientist should have already been aware of the fact that there is no serotonin imbalance in the brain that is associated with depression or anxiety. Researchers have looked for decades for this imbalance, and it doesn't exist. Now, that doesn't mean that SSRIs like Prozac or Zoloft, it doesn't mean that those medications don't work. But what it means is that it's not due to an imbalance. SSRIs for some people can improve mitochondrial function and can
Oh,
improve metabolism. They can actually improve brain metabolism in some people. I think in some people they can dysregulate it and make it
yeah.
worse.